Okay, well, I'm just going to jump in. And something quite different, well, I mean, related to oil extraction. I'm just going to be talking briefly about the ghosts of geology, and hopefully this will kind of set up a conversation with Dr. Moten's talk a little bit later. So I've been interested in this question about how the Earth remembers and also how it forgets. So questions of what I think of as geotrauma. So they're kind of tying together of geologic practices, and particularly in terms of race, and what I call the white geology of colonialism and slavery and its afterlives. So this kind of rotates around questions of geoethics for me, and what kinds of reparations, repair and remembering can be brought with and in the earth and soil and geologic sciences. So really to think about the role of geosciences in organizing the material, but also metaphoric praxis of spatial relations between racial undergrounds. And here I'm going to be talking about Alabama prison mines, and bear in mind I'm talking about this from London and not from Alabama, and that's an important difference to notice. And thinking about this in terms of ongoing plasticity and the kind of political presence of white surfaces in social space, so how social spaces are made. And this kind of is about questions about thinking about an embodied geology. So addressing what might be understood as the ghost of geology is also a way to think about what needs to be resurrected and built from the material sedimentations to question how subjectivity is built and embodied through these geosocial formations of kind of materiality and particularly geology. So I want to start with this photograph of the convict cemetery of the Pratt Coal and Coke Company that operated the Pratt mines, where iron was mined with convict lease labor, young Black men and boys kidnapped by the state for their vagabonding geographies. So this photograph is some of the few visual traces found in the Alabama Library, which attest to the material existence of the convict lease system and form part of its material witnessing. In the sparsity of these material traces, the inhuman basis of minerality obscures and overrides more subjective modes of experience and exchange. So the lives caught up in the mine and the furnace. In the US Steel Cemetery in Pratt City, convicts like John Clark might lay. Convicted of gaming in 1903, he was unable to pay the fine, so ended up in Slosh Sheffield mines, brought from the state for $9 a month. Working off the fine for his crime was 10 days hard labor. Fees for the sheriff's deputies and court officials that derived their wage from convict fees added an additional 104 days in the mine. A month later, according to the inspector's report, John Clark was dead, crushed by falling rock. So building on these structures of property under slavery, convict lease labor extended the long arm of extraction over Black subjectivity, while reorganizing gender and sexuality in historically new ways. So these mineral modes of categorization, when we think of steel, iron, coal, encapsulate the inhuman as a stable form of property for extraction, a lexicon for making non-historical objects rather than subjective registers. So while steel and iron come into the track shiny, bodies of incarcerated routinely disappeared into the heaps of cast-off matter at the shaft entrance. So there is a parallel inhumane grammar deployed in the property category of Black life, seemingly non-resistant to their passage. Minerals, metals, and fuels make materiality available to selective narrativizing and the fantasy of elemental origination. Minerality worked in the underground was transformed into flows of social power on the surface, continuing the enduring structural relation of subterranean racial ordering. The microspatialities of race in the urban space were vertical. The mines went down and the skyscrapers of the heaviest corner on earth went up between 20th Street and First Avenue North in the Magic City. And race was made as a spatial effect of both the narratives of material redemption, so this idea of a kind of telos of development, and the architectures of the industrial city. Urban planning and the maintenance of hierarchized, racialized relations, continued to build worlds through the combined sociologies and geologies of race, as new aesthetics of steel and iron hid the hurt, telling a story of autonomous materialities of modernity. The prism mine performed the material stratification of an epistemic condition of a liminal black understrata, a subterranean convergence of subject and material conditions. So here's the prisms were actually built at the entrance to the mine. So they literally were the opening into the mine shaft. So the Alabama Board of Inspectors in the biannual report note, there was no record kept of these people. What has become of persons sentenced to hard labor prior to 1883, of whom there is absolutely no trace? They have disappeared as completely as if the earth had opened and swallowed them up. The very fact of their existence has been forgotten, except by a few at the humble home who still wait and look in vain for him who does not come. So this inhumane life in the subterranean world reproduced the weather of broader social forces. Geologists' reports formed a crucial part of the boostering for northern investment and development and naturalized industrial development. So natural resources and the use of convict labor were brought together in an argument around natural history. And if we remind ourselves of the particularly the way in which this comes together in a kind of political subjectivity in the Dred Scott decision, where it's produced with this appendage of natural history. So we can see how these kind of both metaphorical and material states of being move across both political life and the kind of actual material circumstances of extraction. So the Magic City of Birmingham, in correspondence to its English counterpart, which was also built on the payout from the legacy of British slavery, is in this kind of mimetic correspondence of the production of coal and empire. So the Magic City arrives into urban life through the prison and through the extraction of young Black men and boys from social space in order to build the urban centres. So race becomes re-weaponized in the convict lease as a means to mobilize natural resources. And in 1898, Alabama obtained 73% of its total state revenue from the hire of convicts, predominantly to the mines. Tennessee Coal and Iron, which owned the mines around Alabama, was bought by United States Steel in 1907 and was the world's first billion-dollar corporation listed on the stock exchange. So it was financed by JP Morgan and Chase Bank. So levitation on the financial market relied on racialized geoforces in extraction. And Southern convict lease labor enriched and expanded white grounds. Coal became seen as an engine of national growth and a new futurity for Southern fortunes, but one that relied on a Black underground in which experimental forms of carceral logics were propagated and corporal history, and in ways that still mark the present. So the experimentation with carceral states and the financing of urban development was very much in its kind of nascent state in Alabama at this time. So challenging these narratives of materiality as isolated from corporeal histories is a way to open up these historic geographies of the prison mine. And I think I might be, am I hitting my time? I think I might have heard one of the little noises.
Yeah, we had the 2-minute warning, and then so that we can get to a few questions. If you can, that would be great.
Great. Yeah. So this, I mean, just to say that the soils that we're going to hear about later are a way to kind of reanimate some of these histories and to think about what these non-histories of urbanization might look like in this kind of mimetic relationship to the geologic cores that actually organize the extraction of resources in the South.